Hi, yogis. Hi, friends, near and far. It's almost like we're ready to start a yoga class, right? I love watching people assemble, hearing that amazing chanting, the incense, the vibe. Everybody kind of just comes down a level or two or three. Beautiful. Power of yoga, just to switch our mindset like that. It's somewhat on purpose. I've done it, but it just kind of magically happens sometimes too. Shifting our mindset from everything that was going on this morning, right? And trying to bring ourselves to the room and to our focus. And so glad that you could all join me here. I told Teresa when I came in that I've been a physical therapist for almost 44 years now. Unbelievable. And a yoga teacher for 25 years. And putting this presentation together, I learned a whole bunch of stuff. So good for you to be able to receive this information here and hopefully be able to use it in your practice, in your lives, in helping to literally build stronger bones and be able to fortify our systems so we can maintain for as long as possible. Special thanks to this amazing lady here, our leader. Yay. Yay. Teresa has created the environment for so many of us to flourish, you guys and the teachers. She's doing today all the things in a million years I would never do with all the audio and the video, all that stuff. So all of you folks at home, thanks for joining us, and thank Teresa for sitting behind you there and making this all happen. How about just a moment we close our eyes? Some of you have done it already. We close our eyes and block out the visuals, cut down distractions. Yeah, I can hear you already take your breath. It's automatic. Send down some roots, some attachments. Find your purpose, your place. And as those roots go deeper, the crown of our head starts to rise towards the heavens. We'll talk about it later. I call these anti-gravity muscles. See if you can find the musculature, especially around your spine, that helps to periscope it nice and tall. So the deep grounding of the roots, the rising of the energy through the crown, we activate the musculature and see if you can start to find some spinal curves. Maybe a slight tilt forward of the pelvic bowl creates the arch in the low back. We draw our low ribs in and maybe shine the heart towards the sky, the heart chakra, center of the sternum. And the head slides back into its bobble-headed place. Perhaps you like to take the backs of the hands on the knees and touch the thumb and index together. Maybe slide the elbows back towards the hips, broadening the collarbones. And find your breath. I suggest you inhale through your nose, warm, hydrate, and purify the air, the prana, the life force. And exhale slowly through your mouth, through your pursed lips, and witness and hear and feel all that clutter, debris, and nonsense as we escort it out of our bodies. Let's see if we can shift our focus to our breath. Anytime we shift to the breath, everything else calms. We reel in that chitta vritta, the monkey mind, and bring ourselves to the room to absorb some information. Let's sit for just a moment with our breath here and see what happens. Before you open your eyes, take a moment to set your intention for our time together. And we blink our eyes open and bring ourselves front and center. Beautiful. So, osteoporosis, it's a big deal these days. Like I said, I've been a PT forever, and we kind of scratched the surface years ago with it, but it's pretty prominent these days and often referred to as the silent disease because many people have it and don't even know they have it. But the problem with osteoporosis is the longer it goes on, the harder it is to get it to reverse. And the risk of fracture is the biggest risk associated with osteoporosis. So how many of you in the room here know that you have a diagnosis of either osteopenia or osteoporosis? I suspect that there'd be a few folks in the room, and maybe some of you have it, like I said, and don't even know you have it. So osteoporosis, and I wrote some of the bullet points up on here. And just so you know, too, you're all going to receive a recording of this. So if you're somebody who likes to take notes, please do. But you'll get a recording of this. So we're going to go through a practice as well. I'm going to yak for a while. I insist that you learn some of the principles behind this rather than just some guy told me to do this exercise. It's really about you understanding why you're doing it, right? Rather than, okay, I'm going to do this, but don't really have a clue as to why, or maybe not the most informed position on why you're doing it. So I hope today that when you leave here and you guys leave your space, so that you'll be able to understand why you need to do this stuff and how it will actually help you. Or maybe you'll decide, nope, I'm not going to do this because it's not going to make any difference in my world. Well, we'll see what happens at the end of it, right? So osteoporosis is basically a medical condition, and it has to do with bone loss, the density of our bones. They become more porous and more brittle and more fragile. So the fragility is the problem that leads to the fractures. And the first question people always ask is, why does it happen to some people and why does it not happen to others? There's lots of different factors. So some of the factors I wrote up here have to do with hormones, and it's male and female. Guys do get osteoporosis. It's more prevalent with females, but it is in the male population as well. And as we get older is part of it, but also sometimes people have hormonal dysfunction their whole life. And if you're not producing enough estrogen or testosterone, the bones are not able to keep up with the demand. So what happens is we end up losing some of that structure to the bone. Some of it is hormonally related. Calcium, you've all heard of calcium. Calcium is the bone builder, and basically deficiencies in calcium can also create this, as well as deficiencies in vitamin D. So vitamin D deficiency is something that's happened over the last 50 years more than ever because we're inside a lot, we're not getting a lot of sun. Vitamin D is, there's many ways to get it, but through the sun is one of the best ways we absorb it from the sun through our skin. So if you're not getting vitamin D is one of the transporting vitamins that helps the calcium go into the bones, simply put. So if you don't have the transporter, you're not going to get there, right? So having deficiencies in vitamin D, having deficiency in calcium from not eating enough calcium-rich foods, and also not absorbing it correctly can lead to this brittle bone situation. So precursor to osteoporosis is osteopenia. So it's a less severe, but also heading towards, and we'll get to it in a moment, towards that brittle bone state. So why do we have this? Sometimes it's a lifetime of deficiency. I was talking to one of the yogis in the room here, and a lifetime of deficiencies in minerals, in some of the nutrients that we need, from medications that were given to us a long time ago. Some of them we realize now are not so good for us. Some people that go through chemotherapy in the attempt to kill the cells that are causing the cancer, it also kills other cells, and some of those are bone building cells too. I think you get the idea. Some of the things that we're putting into our bodies to keep us alive are also creating other problems, and those are some of the side effects that happen from it. So a lifetime of deficiencies. And also, if you're not given the right food as a child, I mean, probably all of us were hopefully cared for as kids and fed well and all, but there's a lot of people that are not. And that can also lead to these deficiencies as we start to get older. Excessive dieting, too, has been shown that there's a link to osteoporosis through that as well. Not getting nutrients is the same idea, starving our bodies of the things that we need. One of those being proteins. Also showing that not enough protein, especially as we're building our bodies, can lead to some of these deficiencies in later life as well. Some of it is genetics. Some of it is something we can't help. And I think we all realize some of that. Heart disease and some of the other things are just part of our genes. And European thin white women are high on the list for osteoporosis. That's through the genetics. So I know some of you are smiling like, that's me. So it's not your fault, but it's part of just who you are and where you've come from, right? And here's the biggest thing that I'd really love to point out. The lack, I'm not even going to call it exercise, the lack of movement and using our bodies is also detrimental. We need to load our systems in order to help to build the bones. And we'll get into it in a little bit more specifics. I hope you're interested in it. But basically, because we're sitting a lot, because we're not out hunting and gathering, because we're not doing a lot of the things we're doing like 150 years ago, we're not using our bodies. We're not building the mass of the bones because we're not using the muscles to torque the bones, and we're getting deficient. So some of this is just because, and I'll use the word, we're getting lazy. You know, we're just sitting a lot and not using our bodies. Some people complain that they have to walk a block or two to park or whatever, but people used to walk 10 miles, right, to do what they needed to do. And I'm sure that that helped to keep the bones building. How about the fact that about 150 years ago, we were only living till about 40, maybe 45 years old as an average. Some people certainly longer, but hey, if you're not living long, then your bones don't have a chance to get so broke down, right? So part of it is the joy of living long lives, but there's some detriment to that as well. Not just osteoporosis, but osteoarthritis and heart disease and all kinds of things that never plagued us before because we were gone before we even could develop any of that stuff. So gosh, into looking into this, it's amazing all the factors that go into how it manifests itself in our later existence. Excessive, this is all stuff you've heard before to all the other diseases, excessive use of alcohol and smoking. Yeah, I mean, it's proven now that too much alcohol and certainly tobacco cigarette smoke is the downfall or the causative factors in many of these diseases or these processes in our bodies. They interrupt the normal cycle in sleep, in all kinds of metabolic activities. So that leads to the breakdown of not just the bones, but a lot of the other systems as well. Okay, a few stats here. 43 million people in the United States have a low bone density mass. I thought I was hearing something out of the corner of my ear there. So that's a lot of people, right? And the biggest problem with this kind of process in our body is the risk of fracture. I've said it already. I'm going to probably say it a bunch more times. And not to scare you or anything, but basically the idea or the statistics show that when you fall and you fracture, and the most common fracture are hip fractures and low spine fractures, one of those three people never recover and end up passing away within 4 years after it because of inactivity and spurring on all the other things that come. So maybe it's a little shocking, but good. You got to do something about trying to prevent that continuation. Lots of research being done too on can you reverse it? Yes. And we'll talk about the ways that you can and some of the positives and some of the negatives, but it's not lost hope that you can do things that will help to rebuild the bones. And it has to do with finding the right postures, knowing what positions are most harmful for the osteoporotic spines and bones, and staying away from those things. How many of you have an active yoga practice in here? Beautiful. So some of you will understand a little bit more as we go through the active part of this, but even if you're not a yogi, many of these things can be adapted to just a home program too. I used to teach classes back in San Francisco, and people would not come if I called it yoga because they were so scared of it. We just called it stretching for athletes or something like that. And people would show up and I would infiltrate yoga into it before they knew it. They were doing yoga. So sometimes you got to trick them into it too. And it's not just the physical asana piece of the yoga practice that helps us in our osteoporosis and other disease stuff, but the calming, right? Bringing ourselves down into a calm state, rebalancing the nervous system, all of that stuff has interplay in helping to slow down the disease process and at least getting in touch with what's going on. So the three most common spots of osteoporotic changes, and this is where they do the testing, is low spine, lumbar spine, you're all shaking your head, yes, your hips, your femoral heads, and your wrists. And when we fall, what are the things that we mostly fall? Outstretched hands. I told you I've been a PT forever. I cannot tell you how many wrist fractures I have worked with, people with wrist fractures I've worked with after falling, putting out a hand. Better to tuck and roll depending on the circumstances, but if you can tuck and roll rather than putting your wrist out, especially if you got osteoporosis, probably better, right? And also if you fall, you end up falling onto your hip. The hip is an amazing thing, and you can see right here, there's a bone that sticks out the side. This guy right over here called the greater trochanter of your femur, and here's the femoral head. The most common fracture site is right here called the neck of the femur. So this is what ends up getting fractured. So a lot of times people fall, they end up hitting that greater trochanter, forces the femoral head into that cup, and boom, it breaks. It even happens when you don't have osteoporosis, and if you do already have this fragility to the bones, the likelihood of fracturing is that much better. The problem with osteoporosis, or one of them, is sometimes when people fall and they fracture the hip, they give them a total hip replacement, right? They'll put a new cup in, they'll put a new ball in, and off you go. Well, one of the things that requires in total hip replacement is there's a shaft that goes down into the femur. And if the bones are brittle, they cannot drill down into that because the bone would fall apart. So that's what I was getting at before. Sometimes they're not reparable. They're like, we cannot fix this fracture, not with a total hip, maybe with a pinning, but it's precarious. What I'm trying to say here is don't fall. So sometimes you can't help it, but lots of times you can. Try not to be distracted. If you're in a place where there's a lot of cobblestones, like traveling to Italy or wherever you might be going, look at the ground and know where you're at so that you're not tripping on stuff. Sometimes you can't help it, but there are times that you can be a little bit more aware of your surroundings, right? And wear the right shoes. All the things I tell my patients too. If you've got hardwood floors in your house, don't wear socks. You'll slide and you'll fall. So wear slippers or wear socks with grippy things on the bottom. And it sounds like we're 1,000 years old, but you know what? This is what happens when you have osteoporosis and you fall. And here's another example, right, of what you can do to prevent it. Watch what you're doing and don't wear slippery socks on hardwood floors, right? I'm not saying to put carpet throughout your house, but you get the idea. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the testing, and things change all the time. You guys have probably heard of T-score before. The T-score is how they rate the amount of bone density loss, and it's based on a DEXA scan, and I just put it out there for you. It's called dual energy X-ray absorption. That's what DEXA stands for. And I thought I'd get real technical, but let's not get real technical. Basically, what they do is they shoot X-rays through you, and the more porous your bones, the more X-ray gets through. Does that make sense? So that's what your T-score is based on. And T-score is, there's also something called a Z-score. T-score has to do with general population. Z-score is even more refined to your age group. So just if you hear Z-score, you'll know what that is. We're going to stay with T-score today. T-score is the general population. So if your T-score is -1 or from a 0, that's osteopenia, the start of osteoporosis. -2.5 below that 0 scale is when osteoporosis is given as a diagnosis. and it can go pretty low past that too. But once you get past the minus 2.5, that's the scale or the number they're using these days to diagnose you as osteoporotic, right? This is not a death sentence. This is not, oh my God, I've got to stay so stiff and so still or I'm going to fracture my bones. Absolutely not. It's just getting aware of how should I move and what are the best things to avoid to prevent it from getting worse. And hopefully we'll get through a bunch of that stuff. So I'm going to skip a bunch of what I just wrote here. It's too much to absorb. So let's just stay with T-score stuff and knowing that you can change it. And they'll do scans. Most of you, I'm sure, that are on medications and whatnot, you go back a year, 6 months, and they check you again and they say you're regulated, or actually it looks a little bit better, hopefully not worse. So fracture risks are, as we talked about, increased as that T-score lowers. Has to do with age as well. So many things do, right? Once you pass 50, things start to change. I don't know if you guys have read the most recent report. The biggest breakdown in our bodies, you ready for this? The first breakdown is 44. Remember that? And then the next breakdown is 60. And I don't know about you, but I can attest to all of that. I'm a yogi. I'm a pretty healthy guy, but I got some bad genetics too. So I noticed at 60, wow, things are really starting to change in my own body. So it was kind of reaffirming to see that report come out that, So again, we're living longer. What are we expecting of our bodies? And especially if we don't take care of them. So doing yoga regularly, of course, is the best thing. We all know that, but some sort of exercise on a regular basis too. And exercise doesn't mean you have to go to the gym. It means take your dog out to Saugatuck Dune State Park in the morning and walk around, load your system, do things that are going to create some torque and some loading. Posture, oh my goodness, you're talking to the right guy here. Posture is such an important part of preventing osteoporotic changes, and I love it. Every time I say that, everybody sits up a little bit straighter. It's fantastic. So you're going to learn in a moment or two that one of the things you want to watch out for in your spine, especially that loads osteoporosis, is this flexion. So this spine does not articulate like ours does. What happens is those bones are close to each other, and that's what causes those compression forces. Your upper back, this thoracic spine, and this is again not a great model, is already somewhat rounded. It's called kyphosis. Do you guys know some of this stuff? So from the side, the spine has indentations. It's a beautiful curve. So your neck has a lordosis in, kyphosis out, lordosis in, kyphosis out. So I'm not saying that your upper back should be flat. It should not, but it should not be, you got it, hyperkyphotic or too rounded. So this kind of posturing loads that spine and definitely creates compression. A friend of mine, I was telling them I was doing this lecture and she sent me this thing, I'm going to order this. And it was a weighted vest for osteoporosis. I'm like, okay, let's look into this. They showed some pictures of people wearing, it's kind of like a life jacket, right? That you put on and has weights in it. So we're going to learn shortly that you do want to weight the system. That's one of the things that helps to build the bones. But can you imagine somebody who's not really aware of their posture and you put a life jacket on them with weight, what's going to happen to their bodies? They're going to definitely do this. So you know what I said to her, don't get that. I'm going to send you the recording of what I'm doing here today. And why don't you try this stuff on for size first? And I'm not poo-pooing everything that's out there, but there's a lot of shysterism going on, whatever the right word is, that somebody gets a diagnosis of whatever it is, and they go on the internet, and this is the savior, and I'm ordering this. And how many of us have those things in our closets, right? That never used it or used it once or whatever. There's so many more natural ways to do this, and we'll talk about some of those other things that are out on the market too, that you don't have to spend a lot of money for. You can load your system with hand weights and other things. In my opinion, unless you have a tremendous command of your posture, I don't think those things are going to be so good for you. So, how about long-winded way of saying posture is a really important part? And what better discipline than yoga to find our posture, right? I will never, ever sit like this. I know I won't. This is natural and normal because this is what I've been doing for my entire life. You can catch up to it too. Most of you I know come to class, and I know your practice have an awareness of bringing ourselves back to this at times, right? Once in a while, you'll find yourself in this position, and that just reminds you, boop, bring it back up into this. Activity levels obviously have a lot to do with fracture risk. The less active you are, the weaker you're going to get, and chances of falling and injuring yourself are going to be that much greater. That's just kind of a no duh. And then balance, another really important part of not falling. So not to put anybody on the spot, and you don't have to answer this, but how do we find balance in our body? What's the mechanism when I stand up and start to walk around the room? What's preventing me from falling? What is it that holds our balance? Anybody? So core, definitely. I'm talking higher up, brain function. What tells your core to fire up like that? So that's one of them. Good for you. Something called proprioception. What is proprioception? The awareness of where we are in space without a visual field. It doesn't mean that your eyes have to be closed. It just means that if I stand up here and I start to walk around, I know that I'm not going to fall, right? Hopefully not. But you might trip on something and then you'll catch your balance again because the proprioceptors are feeding back the information to your brain. They're the strategizers for movement and balance. Where are they located? Throughout your body, mostly in the joints, in the tendons, in the ligaments. This collaboration of all of our systems, right? People that are hypermobile just means that your joints open up too much, usually have deficits in proprioception because the ligaments are not functioning like they should. So I have personally seen people that are hypermobile have more of a tendency to not have a great balance in their practice, I was going to say, in their lives. So those of you who come to my class, we do a lot of balance stuff, a lot of standing, proprioceptive awareness things that fire it up so that when you're out on the street and maybe you trip on something, you catch yourself and you don't end up falling. The cerebellum is part of our brain, and if you have cerebellar problems, that's a whole different story. That's a big balance center too. That's not usually what's so involved in normal function. That's a much deeper thing with tumors and all kinds of awful things that happen up there. But for our purposes today, it's proprioception that we're really going to be working. And to remind you, we will go through a practice after I'm done yakking at you and go through some of these principles. All of this will be available for you on a recording should you decide that, oh, that made sense. I'd like to do some of that. Okay. Medications. The United States, I know, is one of the top overusers of medications. We all know about the horrors of some of the things that have gone on in this country with abuse of medications. So some of the first things that when you go to your doctor, they tell you to take this, do this, do this, do this, and then watch the evening news, right? And the commercial break, it's one medication after the other, after the other, after the other. You start taking one, you need to take another, you need to take another and another. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. And I would love for you guys to hear this next statement. Even if you're taking those medications, and how many of you are taking some sort of osteoporotic med here, right? That's your decision, and we'll go through some of the ideas on why you should and why you shouldn't. But the point is, even if you're taking those medications, they're not doing what a yoga practice or exercise would do. And what is that? Perfectly said. Torque the bone. And how do you torque the bone? With muscle activity. That's how we change the bone densities. Here's a great fact too. I'm glad I remembered this one. Every 10 years, we have a new skeleton. It takes 10 years for everything to absorb and reabsorb, and every 10 years you got a new skeleton. Kind of cool, isn't it? So we want this new skeleton to continue to change. Otherwise, that's what ends up happening is the porous bones, the brittle bones. We want to continue this. So I do not want to get so deep into this, but there's a lot of different types of medication that are given for osteoporosis. The basic is either you're trying to slow down the breakdown of the bones, or you're trying to build up the bones. So depending on which med you're on, and I'm not a physician, that is not my expertise, either it's going to be one or the other. The problem is with all medications, the meds that are given to help to slow down that breakdown also have side effects. And the side effects are sometimes worse than the medications, and it has to do with your body as well. Some people tolerate it unbelievably well, and there's no problem. And the other pendulum is, no, this ain't so good. So again, I don't want to get too deep into it. One of the things that I came across is taking the medications does help to slow down that breakdown, but what it also does is it interrupts the cycle of regenerating some of the bone as well, and you end up fracturing your bone because of that, not because of your osteoporosis. So there was a great statement somewhere, somebody described it as a Congo line, where you have to pass things down, right? And if somebody's not in that line to receive the coconut or whatever you're doing, then it breaks. And that's what that medication does. It creates a stop in that Congo line. So what happens is the bones become more fragile because of that as well, and you end up fracturing your bone. So that doesn't happen to everybody, but there is definitely documented science behind it that many people end up fracturing their bones because of the medications. Something called osteonecrosis. I have a client back in California. I saw her when I was back there. She had a total hip done. I'm like, what happened to you? And I believe she's on this. I just remembered. What happened to you wasn't so much of a fall, but it was taking osteoporosis medication that basically kills the bone. It's called necrosis. So weakened the bone enough that sometimes you fall, but sometimes it actually just fractures because the integrity of the bone is no longer there. That can be one of the side effects of it as well. Spontaneous fractures, slow healing in general, problems with GI stuff, some belly upset, and sometimes worse. People develop heart problems, atrial fibrillation, it's called. That's something to look out for as well. And some people have problems with their eyes as well. Let's not get too deep into it, but what I'm trying to say is here, the medications are not a take this med and you're good, you don't need to do anything else. That's not right. And there's also side effects from it too. That's what you talk to your physician about and be sure that your meds are adjusted correctly, that you're getting the benefits that you need without the side effects, if at all possible. And again, there are a lot of different things. They also offer hormones and different other things. If you're low in your testosterone or estrogen, sometimes boosting those levels will also help in keeping the bones regenerating. So if you decide that you want to take the meds, you still need to address weight-bearing activity, right? Resistance activities using rubber bands or weights or other things to help to stress the muscles. Normally, what we try to do is agonist and antagonist muscle group recruitment. That basically means that it's an isometric kind of contraction, that you're using the muscles on both sides of the joints at the same time, like doing something like this. Building the strength of the muscles, or having the muscles activate, muscles attached to bone, right? They're going to stimulate bone growth. And I wrote it up on here too, Wolff's Law. And Wolff's Law simply states that bones will adapt to the degree of mechanical loading. So the more you load the bones with the muscle activity, the more they are going to respond and will build strength. And not strength of muscle, but strength of the bone, right? You shouldn't use the word strength. The density, the integrity, the building blocks. Remember to, or don't remember, but maybe you never heard this, your bones are often referred to the inside of the bone and the outside, the cortex. So what we're doing is trying to build both the outer wrapping of it as well as the interior, internal architecture of those bones as well. So new studies have shown that through yoga, and they did it with and without medications, that they're showing that yoga alone and exercise alone is helping to rebuild the femurs more than the spine. But again, more research is going to be done, and I'm sure they're going to show the same thing, that the spine is also being helped with this. What I'm trying to say here is it's a positive trend now with the more research that we're doing. We were talking before about a gentleman in New York City, Lauren Fishman. If you haven't read his book, that's definitely one to get. A wonderful atlas of information on osteoporosis, as well as some of the exercises that I'll give you today as well. It was wonderful to read his studies, to know that what I'm presenting and doing is kind of right on track with what they're talking about as well. We want to use those anti-gravity muscles, right? So as I sit like this, so we started at the beginning, even if you don't know what the muscles are called or even where they are, what is it that you're doing that's doing this to your spine? Where are those muscles? And I talk about this as periscoping, right? Not flexing and not extending, but lengthening out and finding the resistance to gravity. Gravity presses down on us all day long. So we want to try to fight some of that whenever we can. Questions? Let me stop talking for just a moment here. I know your brains are all spinning right now. There's a lot of information. Does anybody have any question or any response or anything that you'd like to interject now, so I can grab a sip of water? Anything? Nothing.
When you're talking about like walking, is there like 20 minutes, an hour?
Beautiful. So the recommendations are 30 minutes of exercise 5 to 7 days a week. Does that seem like a lot for you guys? Good, Jen. I love it. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Does it make you think that if you have to say you got to move yourself 30 minutes a day minimum, I suppose there are lots of people that just don't, for lots of different reasons. And I'm certainly to give folks a pass if they're debilitated or they've got some sort of disease function going on, but how about all the people that are just darn lazy and they're just not doing anything? They live in a little triangle of the bedroom, the refrigerator, and the TV kind of thing, and that's all they're basically doing. So in answer to your question, if you move yourself 30 minutes a day, 5 to 7 days a week, you're already ahead of the game. Walking is probably one of the best things that you could possibly do because it's loading. We want impact, right? And I'm going to talk about this later too at the end. Do you guys remember doing jumping jacks in grammar school, right? They're one of the best exercises that you can do because your arms are over your head, you're landing on the ground, you're pumping your heart and your lungs. Done the right way, jumping jacks, so silly, are probably one of the best things that you could do. So impact, you want to walk, you want to go on stairs, you want things that are going to load the system so that the bones end up getting fortified. Through muscular activity, the bones, Wolff's Law, you learned it today, are torqued in a good way. So often people hear torque and they think, oh, I don't want torque. Yes, you do, but you want it done in the right positions. And we are going to go through that in a moment here. so that you understand a little better about all that we're looking for with that. Anybody else? Okay, find your voices, please, because I'm getting tired of talking. Postural awareness. So this yoga program that we're going to talk about, and let's put yoga/exercise, because don't think that you have to be a yogi for this. You don't. Just that yoga is such a wonderful entree into the rest of it too, not just the physical part. So we'll do yoga/exercise, home exercise program, 30 minutes a day at minimum, working on postural awareness, working on mobility. And what is mobility? That's what your joints do. And flexibility, that's what your muscles do. So you want to have joints that are mobile, and you want to have muscles that are somewhat flexible. We want to work on our balance we've talked about. We want to build the bone mass by loading. This is repetitious but good. We want to practice SMART. And what does practicing SMART mean? Knowing what is going to be loading and what is not going to be a bad load on our backs and our bodies. So I've already told you one of the things to watch out for when you have osteoporosis is flexion of your spine, right? So I love when my clients come in that are not yogis and I'm like, well, how the heck am I supposed to get something up off the floor if I don't flex my spine? So I got my glasses out there, right? And I'm standing up, I drop them. How am I going to pick those glasses up? Most people that don't know how to move their bodies are going to do what? They're going to flex their spines, they're going to pick that thing up, and they're going to put it on their face. Some of you have maybe heard, this is one of my favorite things that I hear from clients all the time, and it's always the same thing. They come in with back pain and they say, all I did was fill in the blank, picked my glasses up from the floor, or got my dog bowl or my socks. Well, that's the millionth time that you did it. So your body's now saying, don't do this. So we have other options you just saw. I'm used to this so much. Don't do this. And what do we teach you guys in yoga all the time? Arch the back, flex the hips, tilt the pelvis, and come down. Is my low back flexing? No. And I can come to the ground. Well, easy for me because I've done this for 1,000 years. But people with tight hamstrings, the minute they start to come forward, their pelvis comes under and their back rounds. So if you can't come down in this kind of position, there's other ways. Coming down like this, coming down like this, lots of different ways. If you can get in your brains that I really don't want to bend my spine a lot forward, you're already ahead of the game. I say this to my clients all the time too. You have to round your spine sometimes. You do. Getting up from chairs, just different things. Sometimes you have to round your spine. It's not going to be the end of the world if you do it a few times during the day, but if that's your habituation, that's where the problems come in, right? When I went to PT school all those years ago, we learned all this stuff. That still goes. We learned the flexion, and they also said, don't rotate your spine. Are you kidding me? Of course you have to rotate your spine. Lauren Fishman and a lot of other research has recently shown that that is not true. You can rotate your spine, but you want to do it in a neutral or even in some extension. So not rotating in flexion, but rotating in neutral or some extension. Where do we rotate from? So there you can see your spine, right? Each one of our vertebrae in our back are attached by these facet joints. One touches the next. Whoever or whatever designed us unbelievably. Each one of your vertebral segments is slightly different. So it allows or disallows movements. If you learn nothing else from me today, learn that your low back, your lumbar spine that has 5 vertebrae in it, does not rotate, or very little to start with. So don't rotate your low back. You can't. So don't force it. That's even worse if you're forcing it. We want the movement to come from rib cage, bottom of the rib cage, up. That's where your thoracic spine starts. Ribs attach into that thoracic spine. And you'll see as we get into our practice in a little bit, when we move into rotation, we want to start with this lengthened spine. So we've all gone to class too, right? Where you're sitting in not all, some of us have gone to class, where we sit and we bring ourselves around. What's bringing me around to the right now? Muscle effort, right? That's what I told you. We want a torque. And then if you release your arms and push with the left and pull with the right, that's something that you probably do not want to do with osteoporosis. That's not muscle effort around your spine. That's a lever, and you're moving your bones perhaps too far. So there's a wonderful little cue right there. Don't find the leverage in the poses, but use the muscle effort to bring you there and maybe hold it there. And then over time, perhaps you can add a little bit of leverage to it, but most of it is the muscular effort that you're using to bring you into position. So if we don't want to flex our spines a lot because it crushes it, what do you probably want to do a lot of? Extension. Extension is wonderful for osteoporosis as well as for a lot of other spinal conditions. So you all know what discs are. You've heard the disc, I'm sure. It's those things that are stuck between each one of the vertebrae. It's like a rubber band material on the outside, and it's like a fluid-filled inside. Constantly flexing your spine, like I just showed you, people that bend over like that end up crushing the disc, and eventually they can actually tear. So not only is it good for avoiding disc problems, but it's also good for watching your osteoporosis. You don't want to move into those flex positions. They respond really well to extension. So yogis in the room, without having too much warning of this, what posture do you think might be one of the best things you could do in our yoga practice for osteoporosis and discs? Beautiful. Who said that? Lovely. Out of the side of your mouth, but good. Cobra. It's extension, back extensions. You got it. So this is exactly what I said at the beginning of class. I want to give you the information and education you need that you can understand. Of course, that's going to make a lot of sense. And if you're in a yoga room and the teacher doesn't know so much about osteoporosis or doesn't know you have osteoporosis, don't segment by segment round your spine down if that's what they're telling you to do. You're going to say, I know better. I'm not doing that. I'm going to come down in the way that I know is going to keep my spine really safe. Ah, beautiful. I can see you all shaking your heads. Awesome. So learning from the inside out, right? Not just trying to remember what everybody said, should I or shouldn't I with this, but you understand clearly, I know why I don't want to do this. Start.
I was just wondering about cat and cow.
So great question. And as I was coming through my progression here, so cat and cow, you guys know what cat and cow is, right? What's your instinct? Should you or shouldn't you?
Well, I'm thinking the cat might not be good for me.
Because it's rounding your spine, okay? But the cow?
Would be okay.
Yeah. So I love that you asked it because I was going to get into it later. And it goes back to what I said before. It's not that you never want to flex your spine, but maybe not to the extreme that you would do if you didn't have osteoporosis. You have to flex your spine sometimes. We want to maintain mobility. So as you're going through, maybe you're going to come into a little bit more rounding of your upper back, but not quite so much in the low back. You can still do some, but then work much more on that kind of movement that brings you into your extension. I love that you're already ticking away up there, should I or shouldn't I? And what's the cardinal rule? If you're not sure, don't do it. Right on. Either research it more, ask somebody who might know more about it. But we have a gut system, you know that, right? The enteric system, it's our gut is attached to our brain. And if your gut is saying, I don't think I should do this, you probably shouldn't. So listen to what your gut's telling you and then maybe research it a little bit more. Please do not be afraid that you need to be in a little plexiglass cage and all of that. You can absolutely move. But what's one of the worst things? Oh my goodness, and I say this a lot, sitting in our couches, not even on our couches, right? So many people sit in their couch on their phone doing all this. I catch my kids doing this all the time and like, oh my God, put a pillow behind your back at least so that you're not flexing your spine like that. Keep it in some extension. Yeah.
Maybe you're going to cover this and just stop me, but in forward fold, so you'd be forward folding with that spinal extension as much as
Yes.
possible.
Yes.
Can I still release at the bottom and round down? I
So,
guess that's
so the question is, in forward fold, these are for the folks at home, the mic doesn't pick it all up, can you still release into your full pose at the end? The answer is absolutely yes, as long as your hamstrings are allowing the pelvis to anteriorly tilt. You got a PT here, let's go through it, right? Come stand up, it's time. Your pelvis, and I don't take this for granted anymore because I've actually said to patients before, put your hands on your pelvis, and they've said, I don't know where it is. So here's your pelvis. Here's the pelvic bones, right? Which way do we move our pelvis? You can move it anteriorly and posteriorly. It has to do with these bones up front, which way they're moving. People are confused on that sometimes. Backwards, posterior, forward, anterior. We need an anterior tilt in our pelvis in order to come into that forward bend. Your hamstrings attach onto these sit bones here, right? So if your hamstrings are tight and I start to tilt my pelvis, it's not going to let it do this. It's going to keep it pulled under, and I'm going to have to come into my forward bend. So in answer to your question, you can all try this. If you can tilt your pelvis forward enough and flex the hips, bring your belly down close to your thighs or maybe on your thighs and the crown of the head to the floor, and release your hands to your shins or to the floor. And if you feel like your pelvis is tucking under, bend your knees and sail your sit bones to the back of the room. Can you feel that? So it feels safe to come down like that. I know you're a yogi, you know what's going on with your body. That is perfectly safe because you're not rounding your spine. Perfect. Lovely. Okay. So the question is, when you come back up, should you be extending your spine? You got it. So that's what I was saying before. Sometimes we go to class and I'll hear a teacher say as we go through the flow, come down segment by segment. That's not for you. And that's not for a lot of people because they don't have the control of it. So yes, on the way back up, you're wanting to do the same kind of thing, keeping that extension to the spine as you return. And not just for osteoporosis, but for the disc stuff as well. Yeah. You learned one or two things already? Beautiful. We can all go home now. Have a seat. We're going to take a break in a moment, just a quick break, and then we'll come back and do our practice. I'm almost done with this. Talked about the twist, beautiful, building muscular strength. Coming to class, doing an independent program, God forbid, at home on your own. You can also do it through your activities of daily living. I have a beautiful piece of property out in Fenville. I'm out in my garden. I'm out on the lawn doing all kinds of stuff. I'm doing yoga all day long in my garden, sitting in a squat like this lady is here. I'll come into things like this. I'm moving my body with awareness, right? I hope that I'll make it to 85 or 90 maybe, but I don't want to if I can't move myself. Honestly, I don't want to be here if I can't do the things that I enjoy. And that's why I continue with my yoga practice and I continue with dog walks and all the things that I actually like doing, but sometimes it's like, okay, just go do it. You're going to feel better after. And I do. So yoga, again, one of the best ways to approach all of these things, not just our physical bodies, but the whole nervous system and emotional stuff. Even some silly things like doing laundry, positioning yourself not bent over folding your clothes, but put them up on a high counter, right? I just folded a whole bunch of stuff before I left to come here at my island in my kitchen where I'm at the same height rather than bent over the couch like lots of people are and sifting through and watching TV and doing a million other things at the same time. Not so good. Even on the phone, we're on our phones a lot, right? Talking to friends and whatnot, rather than sitting in your chair, just being on your phone like that, stand up. And while you're talking, maybe you've got it in the stand and you're not holding, Find balance. Just stand on a leg while you're talking to a friend or something, right? Just do some sort of activity that's going to feed the system rather than break it down even more. Doing cooking too, same idea. It's wonderful to do that, but not torquing and loading dishwashers and doing all kinds of weird things, but using your smarts while you're doing your activities of daily living, ADL as they're called, right? And I love hearing this too. So many people say, I don't have time for that. And my response is, you do have time, you're just not making the time. So if you say to yourself after you go to your doctor and you get an osteoporosis diagnosis that you don't have time to exercise, you might as well just forget about the whole thing because the priorities aren't there. I know it's on tape, but I said it and let's move on. Okay. Watching our precautions and increasing our awareness so that hopefully we never fall, and keeping those loads and whatnot to the minimum in the bad positions and the maximum in the good positions. Okay. Any other questions before we take a quick break? Yes, madame.
When we lay in yoga like this, when we're going down, I've noticed sometimes they ask us to go back, although slowly back, and I can't do that. I can tell right away that something's off. I was wondering what your advice, should I just be, okay.
So the question is, coming towards a Navasana boat position as we're trying to lower ourselves down. Again, it's not vertebrae by vertebrae, especially if you've got osteoporosis. If you can keep yourself in this alignment and then slowly lower to the earth, you got it. This is a lot of core activity. I would say put your elbows down on the ground and lower yourself to the earth. You got it. I love that you're thinking that should I or shouldn't I? Yeah, Jen.
What about same with bridge position? You know, people say, okay, feel each one going down and then these going down. Should we?
Do you remember in class when I teach it? We come to the bottom of the rib cage, we skip the low back and we imprint the sacrum. That's part of what we're going to get to. Love that. Bridging is one of the best things you can do for osteoporosis because it's all extension, except sometimes the cues are given, feel each one of the vertebrae, not your low back, skip the low back, keep the curve, imprint the sacrum. Brother in the back.
Yeah, Harvey, when you said the proper way to rotate your body in the upright position.
Yep.
Did you say like from your rib cage up?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You heard it. So the low back vertebrae, the question was, should we rotate from the ribs up? Can you believe I'm remembering to do this? From the ribs up, it's because the joints in the spine here do not want your low back to rotate. So the rotation starts from ribs all the way up to the last vertebrae in your neck. And here's just a little side that should make, hopefully, good sense to you. The things that rotate a lot, the vertebrae, don't flex and extend a lot. And the things that don't rotate your low back have the most amount of flexion and extension. I love that you asked the question because that's proof why our low backs are so precarious with osteoporosis, because if it doesn't rotate, it flexes a whole bunch, and that's what's loading the bones and creating the forces. Where it's not so much in your upper back because the bones don't have the same ability to flex and extend. It's really a beautiful design, and knowing so much about it is so paramount in understanding how you're going to move your bodies around, and especially if you've got something going on, how to keep yourself safe. Great question. Yeah.
So they do the scan on the lower back, that L1
Yep.
through L4. Would you assume that you have the same score all the way up the spine?
So the question was, they do the scan on the low back. Would the score be the same up the spine? Again, I'm not a physician. From my understanding, they do the low back because that's the most often seen fracture sites based on what we just said, so much flexion, right? And the size of the vertebrae and the load on those low back vertebrae is a lot more than your neck and your upper back because the whole weight of your system is down on that lumbar spine. So that'd be an interesting thing to look at. I don't know that they do scans that much higher, but something to look into. I know that the low back is the most susceptible, so that's why they do it. Yeah.
Just, I'm confused now, because we're talking about, you know, the torque and the muscle on the bone.
Yes.
And how that stimulates the osteoblasts. But, so why is the load then negative in another part of the spine?
Great question too. We have to be careful with the word load. Loading, not compression loading, but more torque loading from muscular activity. That's kind of why I don't like that vest idea. That's compression. So compression fractures are some of the most common fractures in lumbar spine osteoporosis. When there's load down on it, you can fracture the bone. Does that make it a little clearer?
Well, yeah, but when we're talking about flexing, that's a load.
It is.
also.
And that's
But
why
it's not a muscular load, is that why we're talking about it?
yes, more of a compression load because the vertebrae, you bet, the anterior, yes, beautiful. Yeah.
So what about wheel? That's sort of like the opposite problem of a forward fold load when your pelvis can't tilt the forward.
So like a full wheel with your hands behind you?
Full wheel be avoided.
So the question was, what about wheel? Wheel's difficult for a lot of people. I don't know that I would go to wheel with most people to start with. I'd certainly start with bridge and then maybe add to it. The biggest problem with wheel is people take it in the wrong spots. We're getting a little off track, but I love this stuff. The spot here, right where your thoracic spine meets your lumbar spine, thoracic 12 and lumbar 1 is the most hyperextended position. If you go to Cirque du Soleil or a contortionist, that's where all that movement's coming from. So if I do teach once in a while a wheel thing, I can see that it's all coming from here because people are so stiff in their thoracic spines. That's why I avoid it, because you end up just torquing into this or into their lumbar spine. The same thing too with bridge, not given the exact muscle firings, people are gonna raise from their lumbar spine almost always and not come into thoracic spine because that's stiff from all of this. It's hard to bring yourself into some of this. So I hope that we'll have enough time to get through some of this stuff. Also a good time to mention, I do have a website, redhawkpt.com, and there's a slew of exercises on there, many of the things that we're going to look at. So you can always use that as a resource too. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, for you guys at home, go get a glass of water, maybe use the bathroom. Same for you guys here. Let's do like maybe less than 10 minutes. So it's 2:05 right now. Let's be back latest 2:15. We only have 45 minutes left to go through a whole bunch of exercise. Okay, guys, let's take a quick break. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? This should be a good time to answer.
People say, can't hear you, sound is off, but.
It's supposed to be.
Okay.
You guys can hear me back at home now, yes? And I think Teresa let you know too, for those folks of you at home, if you have any questions, put it in the little chat box there and we can get to that maybe towards the end of this.
They're saying thank you, they appreciate when you do repeat the question because they cannot hear it unless you repeat it.
Beautiful. I think we got this down, Teresa. Thank you.
Yes.
Actually, I think we should bring up the question that Stardust asked, and I believe it was, if you have osteoporosis, will you also have osteoarthritis? So not necessarily. Osteoarthritis is also an age-related disease, but can also be from trauma and whatnot. But again, it's the same thing when I talk to my clients that have osteoarthritis, excuse me. it's because we were living longer, right? And we're doing all of this stuff and we're loading our joints too much or in the wrong positions, and that creates osteoarthritic changes. So sometimes they will be hand in hand, but it doesn't mean that if you have one, you definitely have the other. Yeah, really good question. Okay, we have about 45 minutes left and a lot more asana and movement than we will ever cover in 45 minutes, but who cares? We'll get through as much as we can, and I'll give you some ideas on where you can find the rest of it, but let's just enjoy the time that we have together. Okay, find an easy seat, friends. So easy seat for me is sitting on the edge of a blanket. And why a blanket? Because when I sit on the floor, I feel like my pelvis is rounding under me, and do we want that? That's posterior tilt of the pelvis, rounding of the spine, flexion, low back and upper back. So by putting myself on a blanket, my pelvis comes up a little bit and I can feel my pelvic bowl tilt forward and whoop, the arch in my back appears. So everybody's going to be different. John's sitting on a bolster. Some of you are sitting on blocks. Whatever's good for you, and we know this, hopefully in this room, there is no right or wrong necessarily, and seeing somebody sit up on a prop doesn't mean that they're not a good yogi. It really goes that far. I will say this sometimes with people, and I can see them sitting like this, but they refuse to sit up on a bolster because, I don't know, it's like a defeat or something. Anywho, sit up on what's appropriate for you. Send your sit bones into the earth. Tilt the pelvis forward slightly, anterior tilt. Can you feel your low back arch a little bit? That lordosis, that's extension neutral away from flexion. Draw the low ribs in. There's a muscle called transversus abdominis. There's a energetic bind, Uddiyana Bandha, that holds that segment stable. This couldn't have been more perfect. We just talked about that segment. That's too hypermobile. When you hold that in, then bring the chest tall, right? So it opens rather than going to this, we come to this. You guys see the difference, right? Opening the upper back, and it's not so easy for folks to do sometimes when their backs are rounded. So don't force it, but see if you can get away from just the drop to the ground. Think energetically, heart chakra, whoop, to the sky. Find that easy seat. Close your eyes again for a moment. Find your inhale and your exhale. Return to your conscious breath. And we open our eyes. Let's practice a little twist. Take your right hand to your left knee. You need to know rights and lefts. Right is towards the windows for you guys, and left hand behind. Prop yourself up. So when people twist, what I often see is they just wing their head around and then they try to torque it, right? Keep your nose facing the plants behind me there. Don't turn your head. And I told you, don't use your arms so much to torque it, but this is just a stability to keep you tall. Turn the bottom of the rib cage towards the side wall to the left. Yep. How many ribs do you have? Any idea? 12 on each side, 24 total. So I call it the 12-second rule. Turn each one of the ribs. It takes you 12 seconds to move up through. And then finally, let the head twist around. We are now using agonist and antagonist muscles. We're creating some force on the bones. Wolff's Law tells us that we're building bones. Go ahead and inhale back to center. Low hovering arms, take it around the opposite way. Prop yourself up. Inhale. Exhale. Don't pull so much with the hands, but more use the musculature to twist. Do your 12-second rule. Roll up through. And then the last thing, look over the right shoulder. Nice. Start to spin back around. These are called medium hovering arms now. Inhale. Exhale, and see where your hands land. Maybe they'll be a little farther back. Keep the chest nice and tall. We don't twist in flexion. And see if you can pull it around. You can use your hands a little bit to help, certainly, but most of it is muscle effort. The hands are guiding. You got it, guys. Inhale back up, medium arms. Exhale, bring it around again. Sit bones are planted, lumbar spine not being torqued. Upper back, middle back. Come on back around. Let's do high arms now. Big, I call these car dealership arms around. Maybe you get the reference. Reach around and use a little twist with that too. We know, come on back around, big high arms, bring it around. This is also a wonderful squeeze out of digestive system, endocrine system tune-up. Beautiful. And then inhale yourself back to center. Take your arms up. For those of you who practice with me, a lot of this is going to be familiar, widespread fingers. I'm so glad we talked about that hypermobile segment here. Draw the low ribs in. I just saw it there, girl. Fantastic. And let's keep our mime arms. Go to the windows. So no movement with the arm dropping, but we got side flexion of our spine. It loves this. Maybe you got the crack and snap that I just got. Inhale back to center and exhale opposite. So mobilizing that mid-thoracic spine. Inhale back to center, exhale to the right. Then maybe let the right ear soften towards that right shoulder. So side bending in, cervical spine. Inhale back to center and exhale opposite. Arms and then ear towards shoulder. Beautiful. Bring it back up and pull the arms back behind you. One of my signature moves, palms come together. Hands face you. Isometric movement, agonist and antagonist muscles. Inhale, exhale, push sides of hands and elbows together and start to rise up. Keep the elbows together as long as you can. Your spine's moving into extension, isn't it? You got it. Take the elbows apart. Index, middle fingers touch overhead. We spread our fingers wide. Inhale, exhale, isometric, slowly lowering elbows down into side pockets. Can you feel that inspires the posture, right? Guys look great. Inhale, come on up. You can do this at your desk, do it at a stoplight, kind of reset the whole system. How about one more? Inhale on the way up and exhale on the way down. Beautiful. All right, let's move into something with our blocks. And I don't know that you guys at home have your blocks. I hope you do. And if you don't, I'm sorry. Maybe practice it a little bit later. Maybe I can borrow those two blocks to show the setup here. He's right here, Teresa. So I love props. We talked about extension of the spine, right? I teach this in class all the time. It tends to go over pretty well. Watch the setup quickly, and then let's see if you guys can get into it. We have one block at its high level. That's for your head. And another block either on its side like this or flat down. And how do you know if it's on its side or flat down? If you're somebody that has a little bit too much kyphosis in your back, you're going to probably want it lower. If you're somebody that's not quite so kyphotic, you can probably tolerate this. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down. You're going to find that lower block in the middle part of your back. It's not your low back. And then the other block, your head rests on it. So before you set up, can you see what this is doing? It's extension of my back, right? Extension of my low back as well. There's no flexion going on in the spine at all. See if you can get set up. And again, I apologize for you guys at home if you don't have your blocks. So start with bent knees. Feel the back of your skull on that upper block. And you might even try at home. You could use a pillow or some other blanket roll or something if you don't have your blocks. And start with bent knees. Put your feet on the floor, please. Block is on mid-thoracic spine, kind of behind the heart, not low. And see if you can just let yourselves dissolve into the blocks. Close your eyes. Neck is in neutral. We release all the pressure from all the forward folding during the day. We know our osteoporotic spines love extension. And I'll take you through this fairly quickly, just in the interest of time. We changed positions of arms and legs. This is a beautiful one. This is a position that often inspires a calming if you're feeling a little frazzled. Take your knees together and your feet apart. So the knees rest into each other like a tent. And take your arms straight up to the sky. Touch the ceiling with your fingertips. And who doesn't like a hug? Go ahead and give yourself a big old hug. Reach around. See if you can get your fingertips to touch your shoulder blades. Elbows will point to the sky. As little muscle effort as possible here, we rest into the pose. Brings on the calm, brings on the quiet. And when you do this on your own, do it as long as it feels right. Let's change position now. Again, just the interest of time. Take your arms to your sides, 45 degrees away from your body with your palms up to the sky. And roll the thumbs back so maybe the thumbnail will touch the floor. That's external rotation and heart opening. Take the soles of your feet together now. Let your knees out to the side. Supta Baddha Konasana legs. Look at all you guys, fantastic. You should see your faces here. Relaxed and calm. Feel your sacrum, the triangle bone below your low back. It's resting on the floor. We're not holding anything here. Everything's resting and calming. Rebalancing our nervous system. I can feel the energy shift in the room. Maybe it feels good to you to take your arms into cactus arms. So bend the elbows, make the backs of the hands onto the floor. Maybe that feels good for the shoulders externally rotated and the chest open. And maybe you like to straighten out your legs, slide them down the mat. More arch in the low back, away from flexion, and more extension in that upper back. Let's try this now. Straighten out your arms, touch the sky with your fingertips. Bend your elbows back. They're karate chop arms, and your hands will touch the block that's under your head. Let's get away from the compression forces that we don't want. By sliding the block towards the back of the room, you'll traction your neck, creating space. Beautiful, Jen. Release the hands now, your choice. There's a million different positions for your arms. What does your intellect tell you? Where do your arms feel like they belong right now? And put them there. And if you change your mind, then change your position. This can be a 15 or 20-minute adventure for you. Find yourself in a quiet room, some good smelling candle or incense, some wonderful chanting or music you like. Unwind yourself. It's osteoporotic care, but it's so much more than that. This is so safe. Sorry to take you out of your peace right now. Go ahead and bend your knees. Have your elbows in at your sides. If you feel like your core is strong enough, inhale, exhale, push your elbows into the ground, your feet into the ground, use your core and pull yourself up, or just roll to your side if that feels easier to bring yourself up. I know that was short, but mostly a good feeling, yes? You can get the sense of if I did this on my own, yummy. Mom's in a much better mood now, right? Okay, onto your backs now, move the blocks out of the way. We'll spend a bunch of time on bridging because bridging is one of the best things you can do. Where does bridging come from, friends, when we come into our bridge position? It's extension of our spines, right? Let's see if we can have it happen not so much from our low back, a little bit, but more from ribs up.
To demonstrate a bridge, there's a few people who are not
Sure.
sure.
Sure. Absolutely. So, thank you, Teresa. We're on our backs. I get to practice too. Middle fingers will touch our heels. That's the distance we want our feet to be away from our buns. Then turn your palms up to the sky so we don't use our hands. Take your toes off the floor, so the balls of the feet are still on the ground, and then put the toes down 2 at a time. The 5th toes, the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, and then the 1st. Press the soles of the feet down into the ground. The back muscles fire up. Those are the ones that kind of periscope the spine. Draw the imaginary egg up into the pelvic bowl. That's your pelvic floor. And then bring your belly button down towards the ground without flattening your back. We don't want to erase the curve. From that, go ahead and lift your pelvis up off the ground. So we lift it up enough that the fronts of the hips open, but not so much in the low back. You with me? Take your hands underneath your back now, interlace your fingers and shoot your knuckles towards your heels and bring your shoulder blades underneath you. There's
opening of upper back. Look down at your heart, the heart chakra, and bring the heart towards your face. That's the opening of upper back, not low back. Maybe you want to just stay right here. Let's add another cue or two because you know you need it. Squeeze the knees together a little bit more and move the knees to the front of your mat. That lengthens you out. Take your arms into your robot arms and now they're at your sides. We squeeze an imaginary block between the hands, push the elbows into the ground, look at your heart, more opening, upper thoracic. Slide the arms out to the side now for abducted arms. Elbows press into the earth and the heart opens even more, not low back, upper back. Yes, indeed. Straighten the arms out. Now touch the sky with your fingertips. And then go ahead and bring the arms over your head if that's part of the practice and lay them down on the floor. Hang out here in your bridge. I often get, how much glute do I use? Maybe 20% of your power. We want our glutes to help to extend our hips, but not to rotate them out. We can do a bunch of different variations. Keep the bridge up, bring your hands back down, touch the floor with the palms, and then bring the arms back up over the head. So the bridge stays up as the arms come down. Keep your arms down now, and let's address the question before, how do we lower? Start to lower from top to bottom. They're called spinous processes, the bones that stick out the back there. See or feel each one of those vertebrae coming towards the ground. When you get to the bottom of the rib cage, skip the rib cage or skip the low back, sorry, and put your sacrum down. Do you feel how you preserve the curve in your low back? Lovely. Soles of the feet together, let the knees out to the side. Baddha Konasana, legs. Rest for a moment there. So look at the precision, right? Even if it's not osteoporosis, it's a wonderful way to move your spine in and out of the bridge pose. All right, take your hands to the outsides of your legs, move your knees back together, and then roll over on your right side and come to a seated position. We're going to skip the belt stretch, number one, because we didn't give you belts, and number two, we are a little pressed for time. Most of you know the belt stretch, I believe. So basically what happens is you're on your back, take a belt around the bottom of your foot, straighten out the leg. I'm going to put my sacrum on the ground, and I'm going to have an arch in my back. I'll straighten my leg, and then you can work your legs side to side. Most of you, I know the folks at home have practiced with me a million times. Why do we want to stretch our hamstrings? So it allows your pelvis to anteriorly tilt and we can maintain the extension to our spines. We know this now, right? You don't have to hopefully remember because you know this. I know that my pelvis will posteriorly tilt if my hamstrings are tight. I want to work on releasing my hamstrings. And I hate to say this, but a lot of times hamstrings will not release because there's instability. They're going to stay contracted until you find stability in your spine. So if you've been fighting with your hamstrings forever, you might need to look deeper into why those hamstrings are trying to hold. I just had to say that. Okay. Bird dogs, famous bird dogs, really helpful. And I'm going to show you a rendition at the wall. Let me show you that first, and then we'll try to practice in the center of the room. Bird dogs are wonderful. Bird dogs are wonderful for getting strength, and I love using the wall. Set yourself up so that your foot is on the wall. You guys are all just going to watch, of course. And why is this going to help if I press my foot to the wall? This is a really important point too. When your foot presses into a wall or the floor, the back muscles fire up. So my foot pressing into the wall fires up my periscoping muscles. You can almost see it, right? The spine extends rather than collapsing. So keeping the foot on the wall contracts the muscles in the back so I can bring my opposite hand up without a lot of wavering. If that feels safe and all, I'll push away from the wall onto the ball of my foot. That will decrease my stability because I brought my center of gravity forward. And then if I feel like I can hold this, I'll dorsiflex my ankle, and all of a sudden, I don't have the wall there anymore, but I can still maintain this.
So if you're somebody that's practicing bird dogs and the teacher tells you to bring your arm up and all of that is going on, you probably need to use a wall or the sense of you pushing your foot back towards something. As a teacher, sometimes I'll go around the room and put a block on the bottom of somebody's foot, press your foot into the block, and immediately you see the pelvis levels itself. This is so fun. Let's try it. Okay, all fours. Hands underneath the shoulders if that works for your wrists, knees underneath the hips. Pull your belly up now because we're prone. The belly comes up, not so much that you flex the spine, but just that you find your deep core. And then pull the imaginary egg up into the pelvic bowl. See if you can straighten out your right leg, take it back behind you, and then push the mound of the big toe to the back of the room. Carpenter's level across your pelvis so the pelvis is not twisting. You guys look awesome. Does it work to take your left hand off the floor and not a lot of wobbling? If the answer is yes, then maintain that. If the answer is no, then maybe you want to use a block or a wall. Yeah, you guys are looking good. How about so gracefully come back to quadruped position, all fours, and then ignite the other side. Pull up the egg, tack up the fabric. Some pelvi are rolling here. Try to keep the carpenter's level across the pelvis. Beautiful. Make it a little more difficult if that seems too easy by reaching forward with your right hand and you'll change your center of gravity. Yikes, and gets a little more wobbly. Can you see how this is wonderful for osteoporosis in your spine? We're not breaking any of the rules. How about going back and forth at home and here 1 or 2 more times? See if you can find that transition without a lot of wobbles. Concentration. Beautifully done. Excellent. All right. Let's come down onto our bellies now. We talked about this before, cobra and prone press-ups. So again, really good for disc problems and really good for our osteoporotic spines, should you have one. So let's start with prone press-ups. Take your hands underneath your shoulders and bring your elbows in. Crown of the head to the front of the room. Don't lead with the head. Inhale. Exhale. Push the top of the feet into the ground, your pubic bone into the ground, and press with your hands and see if you can press yourself up. So it's extension through our spines. You can go into your low back a bit with this, and then slowly use muscles to lower yourself back down to the earth. Maybe 5 of them. Maybe when you're doing it at home, maybe do 10 of them. Don't lift the head. The head will follow what the mid-back is doing. Beautiful. See if now maybe you can prop yourself up onto your elbows to Sphinx pose. Next progression, right? Palms can be flat. You can have fists, whatever's good for you. Curl your toes under, friends. Inhale, exhale, push the body forward a bit. That's going to encourage more thoracic opening. Again, not neck, but thoracic opening. Pause here. Your spine is de-rounding, we're decompressing. You can give a light press of the pubic bone into the ground. That will often lessen the pressure in your low backs. Slowly lower yourself back down to the earth, and maybe you like to try a little low cobra. Slide the hands back a little bit more towards shoulders and top of ribs. Inhale, exhale, elbows are in. Press with your hands and lift with the back of your heart, not your head. Those are all the spinal extensors. Maybe you can take your hands off the floor for some progression. Maybe the arms come out to the side. Watch your neighbor. Left hand touches the floor. Look at your right hand. So side to side, like you're soaring. A beautiful hawk. Beautiful. Put the hands back underneath the shoulders. And maybe one more time, press up. See if you can come up and a little bit higher into your cobra. Pelvis still stays down on the ground. We work back extension. Slowly lower yourself back down. Feel the ribs touch and the forehead. Make some pillow arms for a moment. Turn your head to one side. Feel your heartbeat. Maybe a little bit of warmth building in your bodies.
And let's move to Shalambhasana, the locust pose. Same position on our bellies. Slide your hands back now. Middle fingers go down towards the outside ankle bones. And your forehead touches the earth. Inhale. Exhale, push your pubic bone down into the ground, your feet, tops of the feet into the ground. Lift your palms towards the sky and see if you can peel yourself up off the earth. We're not looking up, we're still looking down. If that's already enough, stay there. Maybe take your legs off the ground. Thighs, toes. Maybe bring your arms forward and reach out. We used to talk in San Francisco about swimming out to Alcatraz. How about we swim over to Chicago or across the lake, right? Maybe kick your arms and legs a little bit. Slide the hands back behind you. Lower yourself down. Whatever way you turned your head last time, turn the head back the other way. These are all extension poses. Get the idea? Really good for spinal extension, disc problems, and certainly osteoporotic changes. All righty, let's come stand up now. So make your way back up to a standing position. Let's grab our blocks. We're going to train our bodies how to move through something called neuromuscular re-education. Fancy words. Your brain is going to teach your muscles how we should move. One block. Take the block up into the groinals. So find the right size block. If it feels like it's too big, take a smaller one. You get the idea. I know I got the crowd here. You all remember what Pez candy dispensers are, right? Sometimes I give this and like, what are you talking about? Here's our Pez candy. So we're going to teach ourselves how to move our spines elegantly, gracefully by recruiting the muscles that we're looking for. Okay, let's find Tadasana first. Take your toes off the floor. You're standing on the balls of the feet and the heels, right? Put the fifth ones down, fourth, third, second, first. Down they go. Big broad foot platform. Notice as you squeeze the block, what is it that you notice when you squeeze the block? Anybody? Whew. Amazing. All the energy rises, right? We find our bandhas. It's recruitment of your core. It keeps us stable. I call this quarter, half, three-quarter, full, moving through the range of motion in quarters. Take your hands on your pelvis. We're going to go into back bend first. Squeeze the block, and like the Pez candy dispenser, take it forward. And can you feel how you want to go into back bend? How about just your low back? Inhale back to center. Exhale, squeeze the block, and this time, reverse Pez. Take it back. Which way does our pelvis want to tilt? Somebody? Forward, anteriorly. Tilt your pelvis. We maintain the extension in our low back, just a quarter of the way down. Maybe a little tugging on the hamstrings. Inhale back to center. Exhale, squeeze the block, push it forward. You want to go into your back bend. There it is, low back. And then how about behind the bottom of the rib cage? Chin still tucked. Beautifully done. Inhale back to center. Exhale, squeeze the block and push it back. Quarter of the way down. And then see if you can come halfway down. We're still maintaining the arch in the back, right? If your hamstrings are tight, you might want to bend your knees or just don't go any farther. That's smartness. Bring yourself back up on the inhale. Exhale, squeeze the block, push it forward, grow the spine tall. Low back, bottom of ribs, and from behind your hearts now, open them up. Inhale back to center. Exhale, squeeze the block, take it back behind you, quarter, half, so the chest is parallel to the floor, still arched in the low back. Take your hands above your kneecaps now. Press the hands into the legs and shoot the crown of your head to the front of the room. Maybe you can continue by flexing the hips and tilting the pelvis and let the crown of the head start to release towards the floor. No flexion in the spine. We can bend forward without flexing our spines. Inhale yourself back up. Exhale, hands on the pelvis. Let's go for full expression now. Push the block forward, low back, low ribs, middle ribs, upper back, and then maybe feels good to let your head release back in this full extension of our spines. Feel how you're building the strength of the muscles
and the density of the bones. Inhale back to center. Exhale, let's go, forward fold. You judge, how far do I go with this? Quarter, half, hands to tops, above the kneecaps, crown of head out to the front. Flex the hips and tilt the pelvis. Maybe slide the hands to the shins, maybe down to the floor if the hamstrings allow it, and then the crown of the head releases. If your low back is rounding, you've gone too far. Put your hands back up onto your pelvis, press the thumbs into the hip creases, and you can draw yourself back up to the tall position. Take your Pez candies out, and just to drive the point home, let's go through one very quick flow here and see if your brain has reorganized what's going on. Inhale your arms up. Exhale, thumbs go back. We extend our spines. Inhale again, and on the exhale, keep the arch in the back. Squeeze the imaginary Pez and lower yourself down to what your body tolerates into forward fold. Put your hands on your shins. Lengthen out your spines. We're still maintaining those curves. Release back down, Uttanasana, standing forward fold. Look to the top of your mat. Don't come up, and walk your hands out in front. The plank pose, fantastic for core building. We're observing all of our precautions here. And you'll see, we just did our cobra. Put your knees down. Put some baguettes under the armpits, trap them in, and lower yourself against gravity. Anti-gravity muscles to the earth. Release the feet, press the pubic bone, hands into the ground. We just did it. Low cobra. Bring the back of the skull and back of the heart to the heavens. Slowly release the heart back down to the floor. Curl the toes under, come through the knees, and come into your plank pose. And let's walk our hands back to our feet, standing forward fold. Press the feet into the earth and reverse your swan. Come on back up. Hands to heart center. I did not do downward facing dog because I wanted to discuss it first. A lot of problems with downward facing dog is when the hamstrings are tight, right? And I go to straighten out my legs, what's going to happen to my low back? It's going to do that. So if your hamstrings are tight, probably not a great idea to come into a full dog, keep the knees bent, or I like using a wall. It's downward facing dog, but not having to weight bear on our hands. And you can really keep the arch in the back and release the heart towards the floor. So make some modifications if you're in a class and they're going through a big flow and dog doesn't feel so good for you, bend your knees or maybe just skip that part of it. That's the intelligence of the practice, right? When you're doing the things that you know are not right for you, don't do them. Okay, let's find a little balance here now. And we'll work some of the proprioceptive concepts. Yikes, our time is ticking away. Step forward on your right foot. Heels on the ground. Outside border of the foot goes on the ground, just your fifth toe. Then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, put them down. Big, broad foot. One of my favorite expressions, if your foot looks like your shoe, you know you have the wrong shoes. So your foot should be big, broad, widespread toe box. Bring the weight onto the right foot. The gluteus medius is the muscle on the side of your hip that's going to contract to hold your pelvis in place, and see if you can pick up your left leg, hand on your knee, knee on your hand. Find a Drisdy focal point, right, in the wall behind maybe one of those plants, and then see if you can release your hands. This is balance. This is loading. Maybe you play around with moving the arms. Nice. Hands back to pelvis. Step back with your left foot. Find that big, broad platform. Step back with the right. Let's even out. Step forward, left foot. Now you know it. Heel down. Fifth toe. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Down they go. Draw it forward. Bring up the right leg. Hand to knee, knee to hand. Find those bandhas. It pulls in the core. Maybe play with the arms. You can maybe do some side arms. And do some windstorm arms. All trying to distract us, but we're so focused in on the stability, nobody's wobbling. Beautiful. Hands back to pelvis, step back right, step back left. That's the basic. Now let's work the proprioceptive component. Step forward on your right foot. And by the way, use a wall at home if this feels too precarious. Draw yourself up, hand to knee, knee to hand. We just did it, right? Hands back to pelvis. Hold that Drisdy focal point on the wall. Close your right eye. What happens? You start to wobble a little bit? I'll bet you do. This is going to retrain those proprioceptors. Hey, I got to keep this body upright. Open your right eye. Close your left eye now. Open your left. And I used to say shut your eyes, but I don't say that anymore. Start to squint. Block out some of the visuals, and those proprioceptors are going to have to pull in to hold you stable. This is a good time to use a wall or maybe a person standing next to you that knows you're going to use them as balance. Open the eyes. Step back with left, step back with right. Anybody feel any juice going in their hips here? I hope so. Go ahead and do the other side. Step forward, left foot. Outside border of the foot, little toe, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Draw up the opposite leg, right leg comes up, hand to knee, knee to hand. Find a Drisdy focal point. Embody yourself. I like to call the dignity of our spines. Close your right eye. Does that change things? Open it. Close your left eye. Open it and start to squint. This is the best proprioceptive drill that I know. Practice it. Keep yourself upright. No fractures, friends. Open your eyes. Step back right foot. Step back left foot. Okay. Chair pose. I used to hate chair pose. It's such a great strength builder and probably one of the top 5 osteoporosis exercises. Okay. You guys know chair, right? Utkatasana. Stand with your feet hip distance apart. Take your toes off the floor. Is he going to say that again? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Down they go. Put your hands above your knees and sit your tush back. So, by the way, if this doesn't feel so good for you, use an actual chair. So there's a chair back there. Should you need it, you can just land on a chair. Sit your tush back. What are we doing with our low backs? I remember distinctly learning in yoga teacher training, they would say, tuck your pelvis under. And I would think, why the heck are they telling me to do that? Don't do that. Keep the arch in your back. See if you can come down so your thighs are parallel to the floor, maybe. That's again co-contraction, hamstrings and quads. All that force on the bones, you're building the strength. Take the arms back behind you. I call this the Vermont ski jumper. Arms go up to the sky and look back between your legs. Keep your arms up to the sky and open your upper back. Shine the heart to the front of the room. So low back is still arched, right? Upper back becoming a little less rounded. And then see if you can get your elbows by your ears and then deepen your chair squat. Squeeze an imaginary block between the knees. Feel all that muscle effort. Fantastic. Building strength, torque in the good way. And then bring yourself back up to tall stand. Woo, hands to the ground. Getting a little hot in here now, right? You can literally feel the strength building in your bodies. Fantastic. Okay. Let's give you a few ideas at the wall. By the way, I teach a class on Wednesday afternoons called Wall Wednesday. You might want to show up for that. We do a lot of this stuff. I already showed you, and too many of you to go to the wall. Let's just look through this, and it's on tape if you want to do it. First one is called that hamstring frisk, where you drop into place. A wonderful release. Rather than armpit, it's more upper back. You can get fancy with it and move towards warrior 3. Left foot on the ground, right leg comes up. Push to the back of the room, the wall's there to hold you. You can get fancy and take a hand down, maybe back, and maybe if you got it in, you take your hand off the wall and find warrior 3. Oops, and back to the wall and back. Side C is a good one. Hand on the wall, either fingertips, palms, or fist. If the wrist is pinchy, take the hand higher. Hand on your hip, press away from the wall and move into this glorious side bend. Inhale the hand up. Exhale, bend the elbow, finger touches the wall. And then maybe reignite the right elbow. Whew, and there's the waistline. Watch that you're not rotating, right? But keeping off to the side. Inhaling the hand up and back to the side it goes. And of course, you're going to do the other side. Beautiful. This one too. Fingertips on the wall. Roll up under the balls of the feet. Balance, control. And then heels back down to the earth. Do it with fingertips. And then start to take one hand away from the wall. And then maybe both hands away without a lot of leaning into the wall. That's going to translate to you putting your foot on the ground and walking with this grace and ease. Okay. Let's have a seat. We have 4 minutes left. Don't kill me if we go over a little bit. I just want to introduce a few things. You guys seen foam mats? They're like these little foam mats that you stand on. I love them and I hate them. Often people are put on foam mats before they can even balance on the floor without a foam mat. So if you do the drills that we just did and you feel, I got this, I'm safe, I can find my balance, stand on a squishy surface, a pillow, a foam mat, something like that, and it will interrupt the proprioceptors. You're going to have to fire up even more to hold your balance. Okay. TheraBands, they're plastic bands that we use in PT all the time, wonderful resistance training. On my website, there's probably 10 different exercises using TheraBands for upper body strengthening and core strengthening for some resistance that we want as well. Jumping jacks, I'm not going to do it in front of the room, but you guys know what jumping jacks are. Jumping jacks, loading the system and giving that impact. So maybe if it doesn't feel like, oh, I can do so, just start a little bit of this. Just that is going to help to load. And then you can start adding all the other pieces into it. A flashback of gym class in 5th grade, right? Anybody hear of those vibration platforms? So I was visiting somewhere, a friend, and they're like, you've got to try this. And vibration platform tries to do what we just talked about, vibratory forces through the system that help to stimulate. Okay, they're expensive. I don't even know how much, several $1,000s probably. Go out and take a walk. I'm telling you, this can be the same versus I got to stay in my house and stand on my vibrating platform. Go out and walk and find some impact and save yourself some cash. That's my opinion, if you couldn't tell. How about jump rope? When's the last time you jump roped? Fun. Grab a jump rope. Don't be on a concrete floor, but some sort of nice soft surface and jump rope. Do it forward, do it back. It's impacting, it's loading. It's a good thing. You don't want to find too much compression again, but the right kind of torque and loading. Doing squats with weights too, just doing some kickbacks, that kind of stuff. I'm going to end with be creative. Based on what I've just told you, it's not a prescription. Do this, this, and this, and don't do anything else. Based on what I just told you, you have a lot of information now to know what you ideally should and maybe should not be doing. And going back to what we said at the start, if it doesn't feel right or you're not sure, don't do it and ask questions of me, of the internet, of your physician, maybe a PT you're working with. Would this be good or not good? And I hate to say it, but lots of people don't know it. And I can tell you right now, lots of yoga teachers don't know a lot of this stuff. So you might be your best guide through all of it. And I'd love for you to catch yourself in class saying, oh no, that's not good for me. And it's not that the yoga teacher doesn't know what they're doing, but they don't know you have osteoporosis, right? So they might say segment by segment or whatever else it is, and you're, nope, that's not for me. And maybe even say to them, I've got osteoporosis after class. That's why I'm not doing that. And they will be very impressed with your abilities. Questions? Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes.
Because I've been wondering about this. Is it okay to do like crunches and sit-ups and these like twisty things?
So question is it okay to do crunches and sit-ups and these twisty things? So I would say yes, as long as you're preserving your curves. And this goes back to what I teach in my sit-ups or abdominal work.
having people not rolling up. You know you're not going to want to do that because that's flexion. But what about this? That's going to actually recruit your rectus abdominis a lot more. And of course, you can do some twisting from your upper back, right? But it's not flexion and twist, but extension and a bit of twist. You're thinking, I love it. Remember too, friends, anytime you press your feet to the ground or to a wall, you're firing up muscles called multifidi. They're the guys that periscope our spines nice and tall. Who wants to sit like this, right? If you do, you're in the wrong room. Embody yourself, find this grace and this ease. Anybody? Yes.
Well, Lori wanted to know, please demonstrate at the end how to tuck and roll and break a fall.
She wants me to hurt myself.
I know. Okay, let her know what you're doing.
So rather than falling out like that on a wrist, and you're almost guaranteed to break the inside wrist that's much more mobile, see instead, can you come down more into something like that to break your fall? Sometimes you can't, right? Because you're in the woods and you trip on a stick or a root and you fly. But sometimes I catch myself. If I'm falling, I'll whoop, tuck and roll, land more on more padding rather than on an outstretched limb. Right on. Anybody else?
She said you can get a vibration platform for under $200.
I love it. You can get a vibration platform for under $200 if you'd like. So you guys get the idea. Why don't we close our eyes again for just a second? I hope you can tell how much I enjoy this stuff. Spreading the gospel, educating, so you know how to steer your ship. Every one of us with a different body and all kinds of things going on. The more you can give the input, the better the success. Go ahead and open your eyes. I love ending always with Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our own lives contribute in some way to that happiness and freedom for all. Would you join me in the chant? And those of you who know it, inhale. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Thumbs to heart center. Press the thumbs to the heart, lift the heart. We pause here to remind ourselves to be so grateful for all we have. Thumbs to the third eye between the eyebrows, still contemplation, point, all-seeing eye, ESPI, clarity spot. All that information we just gave you has just been absorbed into your gray matter. We bend forward, bow forward with awareness of our spines. Namaste. You kids, thank you so much. Thanks for being part of this little laboratory here. I hope this was helpful for you. I love feedback too. You can send it to us or hang out for a little bit. And if there's anything else you'd like to hear, I'm open to present anything. So maybe get in touch with Teresa here and she can facilitate all that. And thank you all you beautiful people out there in Zoom land for joining me too. And most of you know I'm going to be back in San Francisco, September 26th to October 18th. So hopefully we can do some practice there too. Namaste. Yes. Yay, good for us.